Hello, my name is Marietje Schaake. I'm a member of the European Parliament for the Alliance of Liberals and Democrats for Europe. And here in the Parliament I serve on the Foreign Affairs, the International Trade, but also the Culture, Media and Education Committees. And human rights, civil liberties and the impact that new technologies have on citizens globally is a central theme in my work. I'm very sorry I cannot attend your conference in Houston today, but I'm glad to be able to share some thoughts with you through this video. The struggle for human rights has moved online, and the availability of the internet and new technologies has helped people to access information, to freely express themselves and to document human rights abuses, which then can be shared with people in the rest of the world. But governments that seek to retain control are afraid of empowered populations that highlight corruption, injustice, or speak out for freedom and opportunities. And the Vietnamese government is no exception. In Vietnam, some 31 million people use the internet today. That's up from 2 million in the year 2000. And while the government has, on the one hand, embraced internet as a way to support economic development, it also perceives it as a threat to its political monopoly. It's imprisoned bloggers and democracy activists, and it's given them outrageously long prison sentences. On top of the consequences for individual dissidents and human rights defenders themselves, a new decree on internet management would legalize content filtering, censorship and sanctions by the government against vaguely described prohibited acts. And this decree would oblige internet companies and providers, including ones coming from abroad, to cooperate with the government in the surveillance and tracking of cyber dissidents. The EU should recognize and act against these threats. The free flow of information and ideas is one of the fundamental pillars of democracy. And in a globally connected world, citizens should be able to engage in dialogue and to inspire each other to improve the situation in their own country. In the European Parliament, we adopted a resolution in which we highlighted the worrying human rights situation in Vietnam, especially when it comes to freedom of expression. The resolution called on the Vietnamese government to repeal the draft decree on the internet and to fulfill its obligation under international law and agreements. So we asked them to respect basic human rights, such as freedom of expression. And last year I drafted a report here in the European Parliament which set out the first ever digital freedom strategy for the EU in its international relations. And in this report there were a number of key guidelines on how the EU should protect and foster digital freedoms through our foreign policy. As the struggle for human rights has moved online, the EU should do more to be a stronger and more credible defender of those rights by setting a clear and ambitious agenda. People all over the world should have unrestricted access to the internet and other information and communication technologies. As an economic community and a community of values, the EU has both the duty and the ability to protect human rights worldwide. Now, currently the EU is in the process of working on a free trade agreement with Vietnam. And I think we should use our economic leverage to make sure that the Vietnamese government respects basic human rights and freedoms. It is also essential that EU companies seeking to do business and to create jobs in Vietnam are not met with surveillance or censorship, and that they're not forced to perform such acts either. The practices of the Vietnamese authorities do not only have an impact on human rights in the country, but also on opportunities to do business and to attract investment. They must end, and the EU and the international community together must seize every opportunity to address human rights, online or offline, with the Vietnamese government. Well, I hope you'll have a fruitful conference, and I look forward to continuing the discussion about freedom in Vietnam via social media or email. Thank you.